This week's episode of This Is Only a Test is made possible with support from Storyblocks. Every creator should try a Storyblocks membership. Their ever-growing library consists of 4K footage, After Effects and Premiere Pro templates, music, images, sound effects, and more. And Storyblocks' Restock initiative is here to change the landscape of stock media by partnering with creators from the LGBTQI+ community. Their Queer Spaces and Faces initiative will feature 6 new contributors from that community, each creating a collection that features their community authentically and relatably. Explore that library and subscribe today at storyblocks.com/onlyaTest. Once again, that's storyblocks.com/onlyaTest.
Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, May 6th, 2021. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Welcome to the show again. This week we are back on our virtual set. We've got some good feedback from listeners out there and viewers out there. If you're just a listener, check out the video on YouTube where we're now taking advantage of the Zoom immersive set environment. I guess the virtual background.
I don't know about this. I'm like, my head is still stuck on Jibo.
No,
Jibo, why have you done this to me?
Yeah, Norm, you still look like a medical miracle over there.
We're all medical. I guess I'm the only one who needs feet. People enjoyed that. People enjoy. Maybe we'll have to update the virtual background, the render here to include just some feet kicking around. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Great.
But yeah, the thing that we didn't take into account, and so we're recording this on Zoom. The thing we didn't take into account is this feature actually only works for us as we're recording this, and when we save the video, it actually just defaults back to that gridded format. And so I had to simulate the effects of that, including moving Kishore around into Jibo, because we talked about it on the podcast. But I think we have a solution this week.
What is it?
I'm just capturing this window also with OBS.
Smart.
And that looks like it works. If not, the template that Premiere I used last time to composite everyone and key out your backgrounds, that worked. So I can just copy and paste it over here. But maybe we'll also change it up in the coming weeks with different backgrounds. We'll go on location. But I think it kind of works. It feels a little bit like a normalcy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As if I were in the studio, I can look to my left and I'm looking at Kishore now, right?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
It's amazing. It is. It's just like being together. Just like it.
I also want to give a shout out to Jacob Froelich, who's the one who made this virtual background. It's completely CG. He made it originally as a test to put this podcast set into VR chat. Maybe that's something we'll do one day, but I think it looks good. And I showed you guys a photo of what the actual podcast room looks like in the tested studio, and it's Clutter City.
That was horrifying.
Yeah.
Like, you better keep Adam away from like a one-day build of like organizing that room, because there is stuff in there.
There is stuff, I would say not just tested stuff. Adam has some stuff there. There's a lot of stuff going on, but we do for an office revamping at some point. But how are you guys doing? How are your weekends? We're one step closer to your second shots?
Yeah, I have 2 weeks and 2 days remaining before my second shot, which leaves me 1 month before I can wear my mask outside.
Yeah.
I mean, before I can stop wearing my mask outside.
You can always wear the mask, Jeremy. No one's stopping you. I get my second shot Friday, which on retrospect is like, why am I getting a second shot on a Friday when if I got it like on a Monday, I could like miss a couple days of work, like, oh, my arm.
No one's checking for that. You could just tell work that you're getting this shot on Monday, and then you feel terrible. Actually, the best day I guess is Wednesday, and then you could have the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or recover, and then have a weekend where you can go hang out in the park or something.
Sounds like they're gonna approve 12 and up for the Pfizer coming up here soon. So my 14-year-old is none too happy about getting 2 shots, but maybe hopefully the Johnson & Johnson is on the heels of the Pfizer. He'll just have to do the one. We'll see.
Oh,
Let
man.
me at him, Jeremy.
Mm.
I'll get him excited. I mean, look, think about what it can make available to you. Like, pretending you're sick and getting days off of school.
Right?
He'll be into it.
That's a good sale, actually.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, one thing I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Giant Bomb. They're old colleagues. We started working with them, working for them only for about 2 years, way back in the old Whiskey Media days, and they had some big announcements this week. And for podcast listeners, a lot of our podcast listeners are shared audience with their podcast listeners. So, if you aren't aware, 3 of their team members are leaving the site, and so it's a big shakeup over there. I wish them all well. I can't wait to see what they're going to be doing next. That's Alex Navarro, Vinny Caravella, and also Brad Shoemaker. Brad, who also does the Tech Pod with Will, and I think he'll continue to be doing that as far as I know. But I wish them all the best. But one of those things that all good things, right? It makes me think of like how long can all of this stuff last? And this podcast, especially, we're at almost episode 600, keeping, and of course, listeners over the years will know that our tally of our episodes has been muddled. We don't really know what episode we're on. We did these October casts that were split off in multiple episodes, or CES podcast back in the day. But I think by our official account, and that's Will's numbering of the episodes and my following after he left, we are at 598. So we did a big thing for episode 500. We had Will and Gary back in the studio. Obviously, we're not going to do that when we hit episode 600. But it did.
No, we're done with that.
We're done with that. Yeah, but it did make us think about, taking a look back and taking stock of this show. And it is the only show we have untested since we sunsetted Still Entitled earlier this year. And Jeremy, you pitched an idea because we looked at, we honestly only have basically a little over an hour each week to catch up, and we love catching up with you guys. But the format that we had structured the show around, with all our different segments around the news topics, really was maybe better suited for a longer hour and a half, 2-hour show that we used to do way back in the day. And as we're expanding our interests, the things that we want to say and have things to say a lot to say about every week, maybe we only have time for maybe 3 or 4 things. Like, case in point, when we talk about the big Apple keynotes or the big Oculus announcements. And so we're going to try something new. We're going to try a slightly new format. We're still going to do some catch up, check in on each other to kick off the show. But in the days leading up to our recording, we're each going to pick the big topics that we want to talk about, and really only narrow our discussion to about 3 to 4 things every single week. And that will range from pop culture to tech news to science to VR. If there's something big that's happening this week, we'll talk about it, and hopefully quality over quantity in the discussion will make for a more interesting listen for you guys. We're starting off this week, and that also means that we don't have any musical cues. So thinking about that, I kind of think that instead of having different segments, we just have top stories. So at least for this episode, and I apologize to the tested timestamp robot, I'm just going to play the top story cue 4 times. So here goes. Here's our first top story this week.
Top story this week.
All right. Biggest thing, Star Wars Day happened, May the 4th. It's the first of the big commercialized, now it's like a trend, right? The big commercialized days. Every big franchise lays stake on one day of the year. May 4th is Star Wars Day. We had Alien Day. That's April 26th? LV426 was the name of the planet. Everyone kind of makes we had Star Trek Day too. What was that? There was some other pun that went with that. But big announcements on Star Wars Day. We also had the unveil of the Bad Batch TV show on Disney Plus. I haven't seen it. I'm not a big Clone Wars guy, but I think reception has been good so far. But I think the biggest announcement from Star Wars Day is Disneyland, Disney Parks announcing that you'll be able to book reservations on their Galactic Cruiser Hotel next year. for next year, 2022. They've been building it. This is going to be in Orlando. This is their fully immersive multi-day stay, kind of immersive theater crossed with, you know, cruise experience, but it's a hotel experience with an excursion into Galaxy's Edge. We've seen pictures and renders and even some photos of what the cabins will look like. And only at this resort experience will you, as an attendee, as a Star Wars fan, be able to see the fabled Disney working lightsaber. Do you guys see the video for this?
I just watched the animations of it. You can't buy one of these, can you?
No. So this was, it was kind of.
Are you sure about that?
You
it's
cannot.
Disney.
You cannot.
Everything's going to be for sale eventually.
Everything's got its price.
This is like prototype 1, and it was kind of hinted at a press event when they talked about the reopening of Disneyland, but no images were shown, and so entertainment reporters had to dig into patent filings even. But the big hubbub about it was that Disney, for the longest time, had been working on what they think is a functioning lightsaber, not an actual plasma blade, but at least it illuminates and it comes out and it retracts.
Okay.
Deploys and retracts. These are the minimum bar.
So a functioning toy is what you mean to say.
A functioning prop, even.
Right.
I'm
sorry.
Prop.
Yeah.
Right?
At whatever price it's going to go for, prop is probably a better word.
Yeah. And so to unveil this, they announced that this functioning prop will make its way into Walt Disney World in this Halcyon, or what's the name? Is it Halcyon? The name of the ship? In this Galactic Star Cruiser experience, and they had one of their character actors, Ray, hold the lightsaber, and it was live video deploying it. 2 hands holding onto a hilt. Used no special effects, no post editing. We assume in this video, but a blade came out, and a blade fully retracted, and it wasn't one of those nested cones that you see that we've on top of flashlights that we've had for decades now. This is something that actually fully retracts, self-illuminates, and we have an understanding of how it works. So you saw the animations. It was actually a fan-made animations put out on Twitter based on the patents. You want to describe what you saw, Jeremy?
Well, I just saw exactly what you saw. But how do you know it's not a cone? How is that possible?
I assume
if it's a cone, it would be $30, and they should just sell it in the store. Like the implication is that there's some mechanical workings inside this lightsaber, as opposed to cones, which you just fling, and that's how the cones work.
Okay, what I assumed this was a motorized cone extraction device.
It sorta is based off of the fan design extrapolation based off the patent, in the sense that there is a gear that's winding, that's pushing up this sheath, and it looks like the sheath is in 2 parts and kind of wraps around each other to form the cone. And there are LED light strips that unfurl as this grows out of its shell. It's really cool and relatively simple technology, because it, like, the way the fan animation worked is like they made the analogy to like a tape measure.
That's 100%. Let's take to the bear thing. We all played with the steel retractable tape measures as a kid. I wish I actually had one here, but you know what we're talking about, right? Those big metal tape measures you pull out, and the way those work is when you pull out the tape measure, it's a curved piece of steel, so it can coil up into like a fruit roll up. But when you pull it out, because there's a little bit a gentle curve along that steel, it maintains some amount of rigidity. And anyone who's played with one of those steel tape measures knows that at some point when you extend it, beyond maybe 3 or 4 feet, the weight of the metal itself collapses the structural integrity of that steel, and the tape measure bends. And so as a kid, kid-sized tape measure or kid-sized length, you have 1 or 2 feet of that steel out. You can kind of press your thumb against the metal, and then have your retractable lightsaber. Watch out for your pinkies. Watch out for your thumbnails, so you don't hit yourself there. But that's the technology that they're basically employing. He-
Why? How are you guys okay with this? This is not okay. This is a tape measure is a far cry from a lightsaber. I mean, now a lot of us play with tape measures and pretend that they're lightsabers, and that's all well and good. But it does not look like a cylinder. Even if you put two tape measures next to each other, there's nothing resembling a full,
Yeah.
complete,
I have a
solid
visual.
cylinder.
I have a
Great.
visual.
Sure can.
Look at
I
this.
need a visual.
So this is a tape measure, right? And you can see if you're watching the video, there's it's staying relatively rigid, but the moment I have it horizontal, if I extend it out too far, it's drooping, right? So there's going to be structural integrity problems. There's material science at work here, but you can tell there's a little bit of a concavity to this. Now, if you imagine, if you will, not just one of these curved pieces, but
Mhm.
two of them opposite each other to create a full wraparound, right? They're hemisphere, they're half
Yeah.
cylinders,
Mhm.
and those two, and then not made of opaque steel, but made of some type of material that they've done some research on or have outsourced, where it can be a translucent plastic, right?
Mhm.
That can coil
Right.
up. And
I think the problem here is less the mechanical workings of this make sense. It is a material science question, but it's not a lightsaber that you can play lightsaber with. Like you can't touch this if that's really the design, unless it's some fantastic material. You cannot touch this to any other lightsaber because as soon as you dent it or crimp it, it'll probably interfere with the retraction mechanism. And then the like to me, like there's two questions that emerge: like how loud is this? Because now you have mechanical operation. Is it going to be quiet enough that that the speaker can kind of overwhelm it as it unfurls? And then the translucency of the material, I think, is going to be interesting for the LEDs inside to actually light it in a way that makes sense. I think we've seen with NeoPixels inside of some of the higher end lightsabers, you can totally get that effect from
Yeah.
fan builds. So I'm pretty confident there, but those are some of the questions I have.
and
It's really about how tough this thing
Robust.
is.
I
it
love
is, yeah.
hearing you throw out NeoPixels, Kishore. That's cool. I'm glad that you know about those. Listen, you guys, we have not seen what this thing is. What you are describing, the drawings and the the renderings and the animations that's all guesswork. We have not
But
seen
this
a
is based
close
on
up
that
of this.
patent. The patent
We've all-
shows the gears on the inside of the three things they're deploying, the two
Right.
halves of the cylinder plus the LED string that goes up. So as opposed to one LED light that's illuminated at the base that just bounces back and forth, it's a third. It's a coil of LEDs that extends and also retracts. And so the innovation here is compacting, is miniaturizing all of that to something that can fit into a hilt. And if you look at that video, the Rey actor, the way she's holding that lightsaber is very careful, like almost as careful as if you were holding a tape measure and kind of very gently swaying it around. And the hilt is kind of long and extended. That's why it's a two hands, and the bottom of the hilt's almost like obscured in shadow. And it does look like the blade only goes up to maybe a little over 2.5 feet, 28 inches or so. So this is not
Well,
a full.
that's how long a lightsaber is, though.
What is the
That's how
standard
long
lightsaber
this
blade?
lightsaber is.
Lightsabers. I think you kind of want 32 to 36 inches is what you want for.
I'm
a
not
lightsaber.
looking
3
for
feet.
like the Darth Maul like double-headed lightsaber as the first iteration of this. I will say the one thing that gave me a little pause is that the video, you're far away from the actual prop. So
what
we
I'm
don't
saying.
really get much detail on how this works.
And one angle.
But aren't you curious about this? This is really potentially cool tech, like especially if there's some really interesting material science, because it kind of opens up some possibilities within the prop maker community, at least the hobbyist prop maker community, on weapons that sort of unfurl or sort of motion inside of costumes.
That's
we see that a lot of ways.
Yes, that's where I'm at right here. I'm intrigued and I'm curious. I don't feel like I have all the answers. I don't think it's a couple tape measures that are unfurling.
I think it's a couple tape measures, and that's why I think that this is only going to be for the performers, for the cast members,
Right.
and it's a thing that you'll see, when you're living your 3 days on the Galactic Star Cruiser, you'll get to see a big lightsaber fight or something, and you'll get to be one of the and they'll have it as a immersive stage show, and that's the closest you'll be able to get to it because scrutiny under close scrutiny, and especially if you actually want to play with it as you would a lightsaber, this is something I can imagine collapsing pretty quickly. But don't worry about the sound effects. Part of the lightsaber experience is you bring your own sound effects. Even if you had a real like plasma lightsaber, you'd still be making the wum wum sounds with your mouth when you're swinging it around because that's just part of being a Star Wars fan.
Look, if you can't make a lightsaber out of a broomstick in your garage, I don't understand you. You're not really a Star Wars fan. Then. I'm just trying to call back that old video of that guy in the garage.
Star Wars Kid.
Star Wars Kid.
One of the very first memes pre-YouTube. I can't wait to see this. I want to see it. I don't want to have to pay thousands of dollars to stay at the Galactic Star Cruiser to see it. So if it's a success, then we might see it at other parts of Disney World, Disneyland. I think it'll be years before this is something that you're able to buy. And even if it is something you're able to buy, it's going to be super, super expensive. Just look at like the standard, just the hilts they sell at Galaxy's Edge, the little collectible ones. Quality wise, they're okay. They're the officially Disney ones, but some of the fan made hilts are just so much better quality. And I want to see fans take this idea and run with it, and get a chance to recreate it on their own. The miniaturization is not easy, but someone's gonna mock it up in CAD and put out some 3D printed files. That's my hope. Throw in some NeoPixels. Pixels.
What are you talking about, dude? There's no way that people are going to get their hands on this material that's unfurling from your tape measure devices.
You're talking about it like if it's like it's. You're talking about it like it's graphene, dude.
Yeah,
it's not some space age material.
He's talking about it like it's going to show up on Thingiverse, and I don't think so. This is something interesting that we have not seen yet. I want to see the iFixit dismantling of the lightsaber.
I think that would be a long shot for iFixit to get their hands on one. But I do think the mechanism is something that someone could reverse engineer and put up on a Thingiverse like site or sell their own as a fan made thing. The actual material of the retractable blade, fans are going to come up with an approximation. They're already looking online and sourcing materials, and it's all about getting it in quantity and it not custom made. But we're not talking about graphene here. Okay. That's our top story. Let's move on. Hey, to our second top story this week.
Top story this week.
This is all to say, if you don't like listening to the top story music 4 times, hey, we'd love if you could maybe make us some musical cues. What would we call it? Second story, third story, fourth story, next story? We need something. We haven't thought this through enough.
We'll let the fans figure it out.
Yeah.
They could just be little generic sound bites.
Yeah. So just interstitial music, Well, I think we have that. Maybe I'll pull
little
some
10-second things.
Yeah. All right. The next thing we want to talk about is a movie that was released last week on Netflix. This is originally going to be a theatrical release. It's produced by the team of Chris Lord, Phil Miller, the directors of Lego Movie, Lego Movie 2, 2122 Jump Street, wrote and produced the Into the Spider-Verse film, and this was originally called Connected. We actually had talked about it on the podcast when the trailer came out and how unique the animation looked from a stylistic perspective. But the movie is out. Netflix bought up the rights to do an exclusive distribution, and it's called The Mitchells versus the Machines. And so far, it's one of my favorite films, period, seen this year.
Boom. Oh, wait, this year?
You think of all time?
Hey, this is up there. This is a great movie. And when I watched it, I was just struck. I was trying to take in the visuals and sort of develop in my mind what their rule set was, because like with Spider-Man, you kind of get it. Like certain things were rendered on what they call on twos, like every other frame, and certain things were rendered at a full 24 frames a second.
And not just that, but also the post-processing effects, like Spider-Man, as opposed to your standard bokeh effect, to have layering, depth of focus, as opposed to just blurring things in the background. They would do color separations as if it was printing on a comic book, right? That was a stylistic choice they made. And Mitchell's versus the Machines, a lot of really interesting stylistic choices that they had to develop technology for. What caught your eye?
Well, as I was saying, I was trying to establish in my mind what their rules were. And by the end of the movie, I'm still trying to decide what their rule set was because it's all over the place and they tend to break their own rules left and right. And that's like thematically, I loved that aspect of this movie. It just constantly surprised me visually, and the story I did not see coming. It was one of those rare movies that I felt like the third act was better than the lead up to it. You know, it really, there's a great payoff in this film.
Yeah.
And like visually, like there, some things are rendered on twos, but not everything. Like you got like these, everything has this almost like if you take a still frame from the movie, it's clearly 3D rendered, but the textures that they applied to the models are almost painterly. They're almost illustrated faces and features that you see on the people. And everything has an outline. It's not a black outline. It's like a darker outline of the color of whatever the thing is. But not everything has that treatment. Like not everything has that outline. And it's just one. And there are photos in the movie that are real photographs from the, you know, like Wall-E used video footage of the real world, you know, as like archival footage of like what led to the Wall-E universe. This was just like, it was just placed there. It could have easily been an illustration. It didn't have to be a photograph, but it was. There's also real video used from time to time, like of the screaming monkey. And on top of the movie, you then have like these Scott Pilgrim style animations that are applied,
hand drawn
by an artist that you know, it looks as though they were drawn by the protagonist of the movie in her sketch pad. I loved it. It was constantly surprising.
The edge, like the colorful edges, you know, the when we think about the kind of post processing that was done, you know, cell shading video games was such a big thing when the first cell shaded video games came out, and they were able to, on a frame by frame basis with 3D polygonal characters, create in a 2D outline dynamically of like a black outline to make a video game character look like a drawn comic book. And we associate that kind of inked black outline as a drawn style. Here, it's very much a painterly style, not just the post, but the backgrounds all look very pastelly, no hard lines. The outlines of the characters, Sony put out their ImageWorks team, which made this film, did all the effects for this film, put out a video showing that they did edge detection and then kind of blended almost like a complicated Photoshop filter, like a posterized filter, just on those outlines. And again, on a frame by frame basis, which then they did curated. One of the animators talked about how, you know, the very obvious combination of 2D and 3D styles is very apparent and tied to the story, because the lead character Katie Mitchell is an artist, is a filmmaker, and does sketches, right? So it's a very natural way to have these motifs of her sketching on top of their animation. But even when you look at like the faces, the dog was really especially one of them. When you think of how 3D characters are puppeted, right? Because animators, they take a CG model. You know, there's an art team that creates a high resolution CG model, a mesh, and then there's a team that creates a rig, right? Basically, the armature inside that has all the levers that an animator then can pull and stretch, whether it's like the bones or the muscles of the body. But some of the characters, like the faces, you know, for the human characters, you have a ton of points that you can pull, and we've seen glimpses of this, like in the Disney animation documentaries, of how frame by frame they'll create these expressive characters. But what Sony did here was not only do that, they also, on top of the expressive, you know, for a squinched up dog face, they would, you know, make the eyes this shape, but they'd also then, on top of that, on a frame by frame basis, draw squiggly lines as if they were illustrating on top of it. And so that's like an extra layer of animation work on top of your traditional, you know, moving a 3D puppeted character around, and all
right,
of that,
which has to happen after everything else is done.
Yeah.
Like that's almost like a post process.
Yes, yeah,
Well,
but a manual post process.
Yeah,
totally. But the impact to the viewer is that you feel this blurring of the lines between the world she's creating in her films and her sketches and the real world, and like it's so affecting in the context of the story. That's the reason why it works. Like I found myself as I was watching this, like really struck at the comparison between the story of this and Onward, which is a movie that didn't totally work, but it's a very similar like road trip style story that's about family at the heart. But this one just brought the visual storytelling layered a complexity on the entire world that we never got to with Onward. Onward only rested on that same story, and like the background of this, like the neurodiversity of the son, the
Mm,
kind of complicated relationship between the daughter and the dad, even like the
Hugely.
complicated relationship between the mother and the dad, really like it took this to another level. Now I will pause and say this is not better than Spider Verse, like because to me there's something iconic about Miles Morales flying through the air
yeah.
from that movie that is going to last. I don't think we got a singular iconic scene in this that's going to persist in people's minds.
I think it's a good point about the movies that become classics and movies and what the aspirations of the filmmakers are. When you think of a Pixar film, a lot of what we hold very highly about the Pixar films or their movies become classics. They are timeless, even if they may be set in like a stylized world. Like The Incredibles is a timeless film, even though it's a heavy like deco style. Uh, this film, I'll go back to watch it, but it's fine that it's not like like a timeless story in the same way that some of those Disney films feel like they have to be. And in the same way that when we look at the Pixar films and we're so awed by the technical prowess of how photoreal, Toy Story 4 with the cat that they rendered, or all that rain scene, that stuff is so incredibly photoreal, even down to like the fake anamorphic lenses they use to film the movie. Same with Soul when they talk about like the New York scenes. All that feels so technically impressive.
I mean, that's in their roots. You go back to Toy Story, and the toys looked real.
Yes, yeah, yeah, and it goes back to, and this is maybe a philosophy in animation, right? What are you trying to push? This film and what Sony ImageWorks has done with Spider Verse, with Mitchell's versus the Machines, with even going back to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the artistry is not tied to photorealism at all. It
Right.
is, but there's so much technical prowess here and artistry here, and I love that as fans we can recognize this as being very technically incredible, but not have to kind of compare it to the real world.
Well, like one point on that almost brought me out of the story at points is the absolute shade they threw at tech companies throughout this movie was so in your face, where like there's literally lines that was like, this company that you know is bad.
Yeah, but
And
where else
like
do you see that? Like, no one.
I
I
know
don't.
I was impressed by it
Yeah.
more than anything else, but I was sort of shocked at how in your face it was.
But as much as it was in your face, the movie could have been really derivative and predictable with the theme. Like the first trailer, I think was we all agree that it was maybe story wise. We were wondering, is this anything new and novel? Especially that name connected. Is this just going to be okay? Machines bad, parents don't get it. But even though yes, there was those themes in this movie, it's way more than that, and it's the sheer number of jokes. I could not. I mean, I couldn't catch my breath because I was laughing nonstop. They were just packed full of comedy. And going back to like a Pixar film, like that feels like the champagne of animation films. Sometimes you just need some pop rocks and coke.
I don't know. Like, maybe I need to watch it again, but I feel like if I worked at Pixar, I'd be saying like, how can we catch up to what they're doing? For the first time since Toy Story came out, I feel like Pixar is being challenged for being like the front runner in the animation world, because these guys are doing things that Pixar has never gone anywhere near in terms of just like design and breaking rules like this. I mean, it's impressive. I know when Brad Bird was, he made Iron Giant, they're like, we have to get this guy, we have to bring him on, and he made The Incredibles. And I feel like they're probably on some level thinking the same thing. I wish we could bring these guys on.
Yeah, yeah, and same with Disney Animation Studios, right? They made great films, Frozen, Wreck-It Ralph, like a lot of really original IP stuff, Moana, but a lot of that feels rooted in classic traditional storytelling, harkening back. And yeah, you have songs, you modernize a little bit, but the pacing is such that it's very comforting, right? And there's a timeless quality to the heroic prince or princess story. Here, it really feels like a movie that matches the generational tone shift and which is a very big part of the themes of the movie. But younger kids, not millennials, but the Generation Z, this feels very much in line with their sensibilities, and that's an evolution. I think if there was
Right.
any reckoning, that feels like that's something that maybe they're considering at Pixar and Disney.
Beyond the originality of this movie, I was just really happy to see original IP again. It was not a sequel to characters that we've already met. And I was reflecting after it was done. I was like, I want more of this. And at the same time, I'm like, no, I'm good with this family. I want to see more of them furthering whatever this was in another storyline.
Yeah, it's interesting that this was the story they picked, and I would love to know what are the other 5 that got put on the back burner, because this was the one. I mean, these are guys who did Lego and Spider-Man. They were gonna do Han Solo, right?
They were kicked off the project. I mean, they'd filmed a lot of it before Ron Howard was brought on. They casted it, and I mean, that's a film that I wish in an alternate world we would have a chance to see. But also, they just produced this too, right? I'm sure it's their sensibilities, but they didn't write it, they didn't direct it. But their guiding force is what allows, I think, the permission structure for the storytellers to be bolder. And props to Sony for allowing their team. I think, again, building the confidence off of the how well received Spider-Verse was. And Spider-Verse, I mean, they're pulling. We talk about pulling away talent. Kent Powers, who co-directed Soul, is one of the new co-directors of Spider-Verse. So they're pulling those storytellers away from Disney and Pixar into Sony, because they can be given permission to tell animated stories in such fantastical ways. Yeah, so go watch it. It's on Netflix. Mitchell versus the Machines. I mean, as much as we've hyped it up, we haven't spoiled a lot of the details. Most of the details, I still think you're going to be blown away by it, and I'd love to know what you out there think about it. And yeah,
one scene in particular, where towards the end, where the dad nearly has a nervous breakdown. Trying to accomplish something.
Yes,
a lot of us would consider mundane.
Yeah.
My wife, I've never heard her laugh that loud in my life. Like,
well, I thought you were going to say that at that point in the movie, you pulled out a screwdriver from your shirt pocket.
Yeah, no, that's Zach Radding, I bet, or Adam Savage. Yeah, those are the guys.
And then it's a movie. It is about these timeless relationships. Right? The themes of it are about parents and kids. And if you do have kids, like I do now, it especially is resonant. Yeah, it's what a wonderful, wonderful film. Hey everyone, Norm here. Before we continue on, I want to let you know that this week's episode is also made possible with support from Indeed. You're the hiring expert for your company, and what you really need is help making your shortlist of quality candidates when looking for new employees. You need a hiring partner who makes your life easier. You need Indeed. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Post, screen, and interview, all on Indeed. Get your quality shortlist of candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description faster. Only pay for the candidates that meet must-have qualifications, and schedule and complete video interviews in your Indeed dashboard. Indeed Instant Match gives you quality candidates whose resumes fit your job description immediately. And with Indeed skills tests, you can choose from more than 130 skills tests. On average, these tools reduce hiring time by 27%. And according to Talent Nest, Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined. Get started right now with a free $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/onlyattest. Again, get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/onlyattest. Indeed.com/onlyattest. The offer is valid through June 30th. Terms and conditions apply. Now back onto the show. All right, let's move on. Let's change it up. Let's change up the musical cue to something from the old days. Here we go. Yeah, how about that? That works, right?
Perfect.
All right.
Perfecto.
Okay. We can't go without talking about Marvel announcements. Loki is still not out yet. It's premiering. You hear this? Loki, the show, is going to be on Wednesdays now, not Fridays. We had WandaVision and The Falcon and Winter Soldier becoming these like Thursday night, Friday watches, but now Loki is going to be a Wednesday show. So staying up Tuesday nights, which means that we might be able to do recaps. Well, probably still have to wait a week, but to do our recaps. But Marvel put out a little teaser for their Phase 4 movies. We had, the trailer for Shang-Chi come out already, and since the Academy Awards, we also have the Eternals being additionally hyped up now. It's Chloe Zhao who directed that. One. Of course, Best Director and Best Picture. But for Phase 4, we saw our first glimpses of the Eternals. Just a couple shots here and there. I think that film is wrapped and they're in post for that. But also the name of the sequel to Black Panther and the sequel to Captain Marvel. Black Panther 2 will be called Wakanda Forever.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Just walk away. Walk away. I'm not even sure they need to make the movie. That name was so good. I was like, oh, wow. It's perfect.
Yeah, I think you even hear that spoken in this trailer that they posted.
It's one of those, you see the name of the film and you can hear the words with your eyes, right? The actors have talked about how this film obviously is going to acknowledge the passing or the absence of T'Challa, with Chadwick Boseman passing away, and that absence they had to basically rewrite the film, right? Ryan Coogler, who directed and wrote the first one. So we
By the way,
know.
Did either of you expect to see an acknowledgement of that, or hope to see an acknowledgement of that in Captain America and the Winter Soldier?
No, because he's not like a character in that story per se. Like, I know he appeared first in Civil War, but to me, it's I feel like they need to acknowledge it in the place that character exists.
Okay,
and they've already done things to acknowledge his death in a couple other scenes, like pre-rolls ahead of movies. So acknowledge it in the right place and time. And I also think they're figuring out what the story is, because this is complicated now with like the rewrite. And so I kind of don't want them to rush it. I was fine with it.
I think one of the things you're pointing out, though, Jeremy, is when you have the complexity of an interconnected universe, it's tough to try to. You have to ask the audience willing suspension of disbelief to just focus on this story and not always ask, where are the Avengers, where's Shield? With every big global threat, why isn't this other character popping in here? And the realities are, because they're just telling the story, and it's as interconnected as they are. There's only so much you can have between the big Avengers films. And yes, they had the Wakandas in Falcon Winter Soldier, but I think they're still figuring that out. And there was speaking of which, there was another assembled documentary episode that dropped on Disney Plus for the making of the Falcon and Winter Soldier. Interviews with the creative team, with the executive producers, and with the actors about the making of it, and super enjoyable. It's great to see how they traveled around the world, and it was able to work around the lockdown to go to Prague and film in Prague, and not just have things locked in Atlanta. And yeah, it's a lot of money put on the screen. Also, the making and filming of that opening flight sequence from the very first episode that we were all so wowed by. They actually filmed some of those skydivers in the wingsuits and had black magic cameras that they had mounted, and used some of that footage, blending that with some in studio footage with CG. It was really cool to watch the CG breakdowns of all those fight scenes. We also saw the name of the sequel for the Captain Marvel sequel, and it's gonna be called The Marvels. Again,
let's effing go. Kamala Khan confirmed. Let's get this on. So Jeremy, like, this is, I'm not gonna Marvel explain you too much here. There's multiple people that have worn the mantle of Captain Marvel in the universe. There's also multiple people associated to Captain Marvel that have carried a mantle close to the moniker of Captain Marvel, like Miss Marvel, that kind of stuff. And so this is an acknowledgement that those characters are going to start appearing. And one is a teenager by the name of Kamala Khan, who takes the title of Miss Marvel. And we'll probably see maybe Monica Rambeau from
Three
from
Marvels.
WandaVision. Um, it's perfect. Carol Danvers as a character is always that's a lot to put on her given the comic book background to carry an entire film franchise. She doesn't have like the storied background of Iron Man or Spider-Man or Captain America in the source materials. So I think this is the smart move.
Yeah, yeah. And there was a glimpse also, again, the logo of the Fantastic Four film. They've already announced that the director of Spider-Man, Far From Home, the Spider-Man trilogy for Marvel Studios will be moving to Fantastic Four after that.
Can I just tell you something? It's totally irrational. I have been burned by Fantastic Four how many times? Like burned so badly by how bad those movies were.
Maria.
That F4 popped out on the screen and I was cheering. I'm like all in on it because if they this is the holy grail for Marvel because if they can hit Fantastic 4, it's smooth sailing. Like the mutants come easy. Fantastic Four is like to me it was the cornerstone. They are the cornerstone of the Marvel universe, at least the golden and silver age.
Yeah.
So if they can nail them, and it's a hard story to get right, as
It
we've
is.
seen evidence for. But I'm starting to get hyped.
Why do I know the Fantastic Four? Like, obviously, yes, there were those bad movies and all, but I know them from my childhood somehow. Were they
They're
a
one of
cartoon on Saturday morning?
that they were one of the very first comics, like the classic, the comic book cover of the monster coming out of the street.
I did not read the comics, so I must know them from TV.
Oh, there, yeah.
Somewhere else.
Well, there's the Richard Corman film. Famously, before they needed to make that film before they lost the rights to the Fantastic Four movie, and so that was a whole like B movie phenomenon, cult phenomenon. You can find that film online. But yeah, there are a bunch of different Fantastic Four cartoons, and the one even in the '90s has a great theme. Reed Richards is elastic. Yeah, I'll put a link to the
Yeah,
YouTube
you don't need to.
below.
It's good.
How do you
good.
modernize Fantastic Four? Because they are very much a product of the mid-century sensibilities of the nuclear family, of this blonde-haired, blue-eyed, family of a scientist family. How does that resonate today?
They're setting it up so well though, because like the ending of Captain Marvel, where all of a sudden they're like, we have to turn towards space. And now Secret Invasion as a TV series is going to come, and they're pushing towards space. The Fantastic Four were the first people in the Marvel universe that really pushed towards space, and so they have to embrace that aesthetic. And then if you look in the real world with like Elon and Jeff Bezos doing their things in private spaceflight, I think they can thread that needle.
My hope for the Fantastic Four is to have them already exist in the Marvel universe in some way, in that maybe they were sent out to space decades ago, lost in space, and then came back, are coming back now with their powers, and they are out of touch, and they have to modernize themselves in the same way the Captain America way. I think it's gonna be tough to kind of introduce out of nowhere a brilliant, Reed Richards and Sue Richards scientist couple that just watch, the events of all the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and now are coming into the 4. I think that doesn't work for me.
I think Lost in Space is another series altogether.
I know. They can still
But
pull from here and there.
I think there's like some real estate available at the Avengers Tower.
Yeah,
So
yeah. The Four Freedoms
I
Plaza,
think-
and yeah.
I think they're going to take over and make it into the Baxter Building.
That's Avengers Tower. Also, it's the what is it? The MetLife Building in New York, the one right above Grand Central Station. That's the location of it geographically in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They got rid of that building and put up that tower. I think it's the hardest movie for them to do because it is such the relationships and not even talking about the powers, but and their villain set, but the thing that made that family resonate with comic readers needs to be modernized and needs to not feel tacky or outdated. And the whole idea of we got to stick together and we're a family as a team, family as a superhero team. They've tried that multiple times with the other Fantastic Four movies. It has to be something novel. Here's my pitch. Reed Richards is the villain, is the phase 4, phase 5, phase 6 villain.
That didn't even sound good to me, man. But I don't know anything.
Just wait. Just wait till it happens.
And
Jeremy-
how long will we be waiting? This is a 2023 at the earliest kind of film, right? So your newborn will be as old as Avery at this point.
Goodness.
It'll be 2 years. Jeremy, I'm just going to ask you something for future us. Norm and I are both going to get hurt in this relationship with Fantastic Four. It's going to be disappointing in some way. You're going to have to protect us.
All right. I'll go in with open eyes, and I'll let you guys know it's not as bad as you think it is.
Okay. All right. That's it for our Marvel coverage, and let's move on to our last top story. All right, a little bit in the world of tech. If you're following anything going on in the tech world, one of the biggest things going on is the big lawsuit between Epic and Apple. This is over Apple's control of their app store and refusal to allow third-party app stores. Epic tried to do that with Fortnite having like their own storefront for you in the game to buy things, and Apple, of course, famously kicked Fortnite off of the platform. And so this is all going to court, and it's all like testimony you can follow and hear. It's all being brought out, and we're seeing all types of revelations. But it really kind of boils down to the walled garden, arguments and debates over that we've had since the beginning of the App Store almost 10 years ago now, and it's even spilling into that kind of walled garden into other app ecosystems. Sure, what's going on in the world of like Google and Roku?
All right, so you both have to keep me off my soapbox because I'm liable to rant here because this is one of those things that I think bothers me to no end. So I was one of the early adopters of YouTube TV. I no longer subscribe to the platform. I subscribed to it when it was $35. I loved aspects of it, like the unlimited DVR, the ability to sort of use it on multiple devices seamlessly, its integration into the Google ecosystem. It had some UI UX problems, but it generally just became a thing that you could just use on any streaming hardware. And my streaming hardware of choice is Roku. And not because I think Roku is the superior hardware, but because it's the cheapest one. And it works fine enough for me. So this past week, YouTube and Roku Google and Roku have gotten into a very public heated argument, and YouTube TV is no longer available as an app in the Roku store. This really boils down to a fight primarily about a codec, because Google is championing the AV1 codec, which is a compression codec that most of the big players like Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, they've all signed on to in the future because it uses less bandwidth with its compression algorithm. It's going to be great for as we go from 4K to potentially even 8K. But not many devices support it now, and you need certain chips in the hardware in these streaming players to support it. And so part of Roku's accusation against Google in the context of YouTube TV being available was that they claim Google's asking them to upgrade their hardware to support the AV1 codec. In the meantime, if you went and bought a Chromecast right now from the store, it does not support AV1. So it's like, it's sort of bizarre. And Roku's whole argument is like, hey, we can do this, but it's going to raise the price of our devices. And that's our competitive advantage right now, is that we are $30 to $40 cheaper than everywhere else. In addition, they're arguing about search, and particularly voice search. So one of the things that Roku really went in on early on these devices was the ability to use a voice search that would search across platforms. So if you're like, I want to see Lost in Space, it would search universally across all the platforms that it was available to, because we're in this fragmented streaming war landscape, and it would tell you where it is. And what they're claiming is that Google is asking for, if you do that like their search in YouTube would come up first. Like Google is denying this. All this is public and ugly, but it brings me to this thing. It's like I subscribe to services, right? Like we all do that. And then I buy a piece of hardware and I expect the service that I bought the piece of hardware for to work together.
Yep.
And now we're in this like it feels almost like a bribery scheme. Like you have to pay me X amount of money for my app to be available on your hardware. And you buy the hardware with some assumptions. And then because of this dispute, you don't have it. So if you watch TV using YouTube TV and you have Roku devices, you're like SOL right now. You
Yeah.
can't watch TV. And it's crazy to me because this is not how it works in any other domain that I could think of. I was like, what is the other technology domain that this works in? And so I'm like really struggling with this idea of the purchasing of the hardware, what that means for my expectation as a consumer for being able to access content that I pay for elsewhere.
Well,
Hardware service.
another comparison would be, I mean, exactly what Norm mentioned. Putting Epic on the iOS. People who played Fortnite on their phone could no longer do that once it got
And all
removed.
of this goes down to that the legalese that no one bothers to read, the TOS, right? The terms of service. And the terms of service, you know, I'm sure technically it's been the same throughout the old days. When you're buying software, you're buying a license to use a software. When you're buying a movie, even though in the marketing, buy this movie. When you buy a movie on iTunes, Apple can take that, they can sunset that movie and you lose any access to watch that movie, even though you've quote unquote bought the license to watch it. Ownership in this, um, it- it's not very consumer friendly until there are class action lawsuits that go against these companies to push back. I can see this going beyond just the smartphones and the set top boxes, in which the software is constantly and apps are being updated, and there may be bickering between the big companies. But into even places like cars and all the other places where there are connected services that hardware now increasingly relies on um, for functionality.
Yeah, I mean, two things stuck out to me. Like the only analogy I could think of is when new consoles come out and they say they don't support old games on those new consoles. That's happened multiple times in the Xbox ecosystem. It's happened in the PlayStation ecosystem, and just how angry that makes me
Well, it's
as a
different, right?
consumer.
That's
Is
something
it?
new. That's something new that you can choose to buy or not with the understanding of what's going to work on it. It's not like you bought a PlayStation 5, it ran, Ratchet and Clank and then stopped running Ratchet and Clank.
Fair is so I mean, so what you're saying is this is worse, which is how I feel, but like
Yeah.
this is the closest analogy I came up with. And everyone is claiming they're doing what's best in the name of the consumer, and like I have no doubt that AV1 is a better codec for consumers long term, but this sucks. I have no other way to sort of put it. And honestly, like where I'm starting to come down on it is like this is straight up anti-competitive, because if Google can leverage its power to do this, to basically force the hardware manufacturer to upgrade its hardware, it's going to become more and more expensive for other players to enter the space. Roku has the largest market share of any of the streaming hardware devices, and they're having trouble keeping up with what the demands are from Google. And I think we're seeing the same thing play out with Apple. We even saw Intel on the other side of this to a certain extent. It's not quite analogous, but I'm wondering if this is the beginning of the end of Roku, and we're seeing it play out in like a very public kind
In
of
the same
ugly
way
way.
that like Apple saw the end of Flash.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, bullying moves. Big companies. They build all this, theoretical goodwill with convenience and with good pricing initially, and then over time, their expectations internally are to make more money or to dominate more of the market or to move into those marketplaces themselves, and they want to push out the competitors. It feels very anti-competitive. I think the video game analogy is it's spot on. Sony even last month, faced tons of user pushback on the decision to close down the PS3 and the PS Vita game stores. And on paper, Jeremy, the argument is sound. PS3 is a decade-old device. Same with the PS Vita. It's well within their technical legal right to not support those digital storefronts anymore. But it feels like they do it until they can't get away with it. Every time they make these big decisions, they hope that the pushback will just fade over time, and users will accept it for the good of the future of the business. And in this case, they walked back that decision and allowed people, they're going to keep up those storefronts for people to download the games. It's
Now, I'll say I didn't make this choice because of this, but I unsubscribed from YouTube TV because I don't really care for this kind of behavior. It's harder to do that with hardware. You can't unsubscribe from the piece of hardware. You bought it. But I think you're right, Norm. I think it's going to take backlash from a user base, and I'm not sure the consumer base is there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really unfortunate, and we should not just roll over and let these companies, you know, do what they will. We should find alternatives, and there are increasingly few of them in the hardware space and in these kind of services spaces. All right, so there goes our first episode with this new format. We chose 4 topics, the 4 things we wanted to talk about this week. They're going to vary week by week. If sometimes it might be 2 topics. If there's a big keynote, 3, 4. I think we want to keep it to a tight hour. And
hey, you know what? I suggest they don't always have to be current news either. We should cover the top stories, but if there's something that we have time for that just interests us, I think that this is an opportunity to have really interesting discussions that aren't necessarily news based.
Totally.
Please,
I love that. And also,
Yeah.
that's an invitation for you out there to tweet at us with topics that you want us to discuss, right? Take a look back of things things that have happened, based on our years of covering these spaces. We're open to suggestions also.
Totally. And I'm in the This Is Only a Test Discord channel. If you're on the Tested Discord, you can hit me up there. Let us know what you want to hear about, because I think Jeremy was doing some homework on this, and I think he has topics that will take us out another 5 years or so on this.
I think you're confusing weeks with years, but yes.
Yeah, same difference.
Bring back things that annoy me. Bring back things that annoy me. We're always love to hear your interstitial music. I know a lot of you out there have great musical talents, and if you want to create we don't even need any vocals, just something that's up to 10 seconds that we can play between the segments. We'll go try those out as well. All right, that does it for this episode. We'll be back next week. There's ViveCon happening next week. Big rumors on new headsets, so we're going to talk about VR there. But there should be some other big stuff to talk about as well. Thank you again for listening. We're going to stick with an outro from Great Job from the archives. This one, I believe, is called Quick Hits. Here we go.
Hi there, I didn't see you.
Tested.
Going back to some hardware stuff, we're going to get some quick hits. Thanks for rickrolling us. Opposite of the Quick Hits episode. All right, we'll see you next week. Bye.